Hi, this is Doug Cogswell. I'd like to take just a few minutes to talk about relationship mapping and some work we've recently done with Dartmouth College. And I'm going to be joined by Mike Foote, who is the Executive Director of Research and Prospect Management at Dartmouth College. We spoke together on an Ellucian Advancement Week webinar a couple weeks ago. But let me just describe the concept first. So the goal is to use the data you have person, and then with ADVIZOR, we'll create a ranked list of other people with the strongest connection to that selected person. So for example, if you selected me and I did go to Dartmouth, and Mike will talk about that, you'll get a list of other alums who I am most likely to know and who are most likely to know me. So if you're trying to find a way to reach me, these would be the most likely people. The list will be ranked with a numeric score from high to low, and the factors that drive the in the case coming up, Peter high score. I know Peter because we were both classes of 77s, engineering majors. We didn't play hockey together. I did play hockey. Fraternity, you live in Chicago. There's a set of things here that are attributes that we both have, that the more we have them in common, the more we are likely to know each other, and he would be a good approach to me or me. So the factors we use, and this is primarily higher ed because this is where you have all the connection happens in the 4-year experience on campus, and then alumni events and other things that happen afterwards. And this is not, it's an example of a list. So some schools will have more data, some will have less. You would kind of work with what's there, but it's attributes of people. So class year, and we generally want to go +3 and -3 because I'm a 77, but some of my friends were 78s and 79s, and we can adjust the weighting so the 77s in my case get the highest weighting, the 78s a little lower, 79s a little low, 80s a little lower, and so forth. These are things that together with other people, we built lasting relationships. Same sports team, other key activities, numbers of reunions because presumably we've been back. Peter's come back. I know Peter. Numbers of alumni events, helps build those connections. The same grad school in the same year. Freshman dorm. In the Dartmouth case, it actually isn't currently available, but we're trying to get it because that's where a lot of initial connections happen and they create friendships that last. Live in the same city area. This would be current. So, I'm connected with people in Chicago because I live in Chicago, and they're my friends because we do things together. So we may have done less stuff earlier on, but we're getting connected now. Same employer. This kind of stuff and the social media stuff gets a lot of press out there. But the fact that two people work for, say, United Technology doesn't mean they know each other. And even if they know each other, they may not have a friendship. So we're trying to get at the more significant attributes that describe connection and why people might actually know each other and be comfortable taking a call from one another. And what happens is, you click on me, the ADVIZOR will figure out all my attributes because it's from the attributes in sports and other tables. It'll connect, and each factor will be weighted. So if I'm a 77, it's a point. Somebody's get that, they get a 0.1. If they get a 78, they might get a 0.5, and so forth and so on. So we can adjust the weights at the factor level. Clicking on, say, me matches through my factors to other people who have one or more of those factors. So, we're an in-memory model, and you link it through those factors to the rest of the people. And the scores then tally by person because, every factor connection to a person gets a score, and you total it up, and it's dynamically calculated, so it happens on the fly, and adjusts every day as the data updates. So the score will tally by person and total the weight of the matches. The names and the weighted scores will show in an exportable list. So if you click me, you'll get the list of people who have, in ranked order, the highest scores. Maybe 20 is the top, and then there's an 18, a 15, a 14, 12, a bunch of 8s, and so forth. And then there's a second list that shows the specific factors for the people that matched on and how much each factor contributed to each person's score. And those scores are made up of things like, were we in the same class? Were we in the same major, same freshman dorm? Do we currently live in the same city area, and so forth? So now I'm going to switch over to the Ellucian webinar and introduce Mike Foote, who's going to take us through the work he's been doing at Dartmouth on this whole project and concept.
I took some liberty in adding a sneak peek here It's something we've really just begun to build in the last month, but it's something we're excited about. I'd love to hear some comments on it because I think it has some legs here. In thinking about what we wanted to demonstrate today, and in talking with Doug and his team about some of our new ideas, the concept of an in-house relationship mapping tool surfaced, and you'll see in a minute that what was ultimately developed and what was done under the same premise, really, of predictive modeling, and that is that we have data at our fingertips, and we want to utilize that data as much as possible in-house rather than look towards outside tools. We've had some misses in this relationship mapping arena in the recent past. We've had some near hits. We utilize a couple of tools that touch on connections between one alumnus and another using publicly available data, skimming what's out there on the internet and saying, hey, this donor or this prospect or this alumnus once sits on the board over here with this other alumnus, but it doesn't get at the real heart of the relationship. And a lot of times we're not finding connections that way, or the connections that we do find are relatively weak from a leveraging standpoint. So I'll walk you through the concept, and that's very much what it is right now. It's a concept at this point of a new tool, and we'll show you the beta version. So similar to predictive modeling, we started with a question, and here the question is, who knows this alumnus or alumni? Who really knows who? So how many times have you sat, say, in a prospect strategy session where a prospect's being discussed and the question comes up of, how do we get this person engaged? And that typically leads to who knows them, what existing relationships can we use to begin leveraging that relationship and bring somebody closer to the institution. And that discussion of who knows who typically leads to what? The same names popping up. Well, maybe we can put, so-and-so on the case, they're respected, but that so-and-so doesn't have a deep relationship to open the door to this individual. So this project was looking to capture who really knows who within our own constituency based on our data. No one knows as much about our alumni than us. We feel the wealth of information we have on these folks is typically quite incredible and way much deeper than anything you might find in a typical corporate bio. We know where they went to high school many times. We know where they grew up. Certainly we know what year they graduated, and many times if they have graduate degrees. We know many times what sports they played and clubs they were in, and fraternities or sororities they were in. And the list goes really on and on based on the wealth of data in our database. So experience has told us that when we look for connections to a specific alumnus, those that were closest to them while on campus are often those that remain closest to them years and years later. We wanted to build a system that brought those deep connections to the forefront. So here it is. Here's a rough view of what we were looking for. In this example, I've locked in on one specific alumnus, in this case, our very own Doug Cogswell. And our question here is, who might Doug know well? So think of the scenario such as Doug has major capacity, but he's not engaged, or he's only slightly engaged. He's not returning an officer's phone call or emails where that officer is looking to set up an introductory meeting, perhaps. He hasn't come to any event in recent years, despite several attempts to get him there. And he's just a tough nut to crack. But on the other side, we have...
Wait a minute, Mike. This is getting a little bit low right now, but keep going.
Yeah. So it's all hypothetical.
Yeah, all hypothetical. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah. But we have, we know we have hundreds of other alumni that are engaged at the institution. So do any of them know Doug well enough to assist us in making an introduction and helping us get in the door with this particular alumnus? So what this tool does is digs into the database across a number of factors where Doug might have deeper interactions with other alumni, either while here on campus or elsewhere since his graduation. And it gives everyone in the database a score based on having similar factors, and we see those scores right here. So scanning that list of names, we might recognize a particularly more engaged alumnus that can help us get in the door with Doug. So Peter Mills, for instance.
Yeah, Mike, when you brought up Peter Mills, by the way, I was looking at this the other day. Actually, yeah, he would be a great guy to connect with me. I mean, I connected multiple ways on campus and over the years. So that actually is a great example of somebody who scores high, who I would take a call from, a letter from. If he wanted to have lunch with me, I'd love to sit down and talk with him. So this actually worked for me.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I know we haven't chatted too much on this particular, on the results here, but we'll look to. That's exactly what we're trying to get at. Is the incidences where one alumnus knows another deeper than what might be out there on the internet, based on real data that's in our database and at our fingertips, and has a real historical, characteristic to it. So, Doug, you know Peter well. The data tells us you both graduated, of course, from at the same year here at Dartmouth. You both have Harvard MBAs in the same class. You were both engineering sciences majors. And, imagine this tool continuing to be developed where it's highlighting connections based on employment data beyond field of work, but touching on when two individuals worked at the same company during the same time, whether they dormed together while they were students here, or whether perhaps they live on the same street in the same town, either now or crossed over at one point, living on the same street. We're just simply trying to increase the yield rate of who knows who, and creating a tool where by simply entering one individual's name, we can get immediate feedback on who they are most likely to have relationships with. So yeah, we're excited about where the tool might lead. We're continuing to build it out, continuing to work with Doug and his team there and doing that. And we think, in fact, we're almost positive it'll have an immediate impact during strategy sessions that we have with our different officers in highlighting where we can begin leveraging relationships. So thank you. Short, brief, wanted to touch on another, go ahead. On just how we've been conducting predictive modeling, talk a little bit about, again, that sense of just get started. It's much easier than you may think it is. If you're already doing it, we want to hear a lot, feedback on what you're currently doing, other areas we haven't thought of. So with that, happy to take questions or any comments or feedback.
So we'll go ahead and dig into some of these questions. So Mike, you had talked about sort of the on-campus experience for alumni and using that as a factor of data that you use. So what kinds of factors and data did you use to represent that information to put that into your model?
Oh, sure. So within our database, we have a wealth of information that we bring over historically that we begin capturing the moment they sometimes step on campus, but certainly begins being captured in our database once they graduate. And those are items like what sports they participated in, what Greek affiliation, fraternity, or sorority they were involved in, student activities. One of the big factors at Dartmouth, off-campus programs is a big part of the educational experience. So if they travel to another country for a semester, we know who they traveled with, and a lot of times those bonds are built while there. Club activities, majors that they were involved in, minors, really just anything that might have touched on, that they might have touched on while they were a student. We're using those as factors to capture their on-campus experience. And we're looking to bring in some outside data, including who they dormed with, where they lived while they were students, and other items like that.
So one question is for Mike, when you uncover the relationships, using the models and some of the information, are you hard coding those back into your database, or how are you capturing them to, continue that ongoing?
Yeah, I'll just add too, if it touches on the latter part where we're talking about relationship mapping and those relationships, again, that tool in that particular case will highlight potential deeper relationships between one alumnus and another. Once we verify that that relationship does exist, so in the case I gave, we might reach out to Peter Mills and say, hey, do you know Doug Cogswell? And he says, yeah, I know Doug. He's one of my best buds. We then would hard code that in our system within the relationships area of Advance as being a personal relationship, and we might capture some context of that relationship in there.
Yeah, and good point. And those relationship scores that Mike showed are actually dynamically calculated on the fly, so that's the advantage of an in-memory mark. Like when you clicked me, it looked at all of other things I've done, and then there's this link back to everybody else, and there's a score which can be adjusted for, the fraternity might be a 1, the same classroom might be a 1, the same company might be a 0.5 or whatever, then it adds them up dynamically on the fly. So there's two ways to do that. I mean, one would be to try to pre-calculate everybody against everybody, which would be a massive math problem. The other way is sort of soft coding and letting it just dynamically calculate, which for us is less than a second. So you can click anybody you want, and it will dynamically calculate the scores against everybody else, which, and as Mike said, you can code that back in somewhere, export it, do what you want with it. So there's different ways of solving that problem, but the in-memory mart and dynamically doing it saves a lot of work in general.